why don't you gentlemen begin by telling us a bit about CSAE? Michael, would you like to kick off?
Absolutely, Doug. And by the way, thanks very much for inviting Guy and I to be part of this important conversation. I think I'd start by giving the listeners an overview of who CSAE is. And essentially, we're the association for association executives and business members that serve our community throughout Canada. The organization's been around since 1951, and our focus is largely on providing those member groups with the knowledge and resources that they need to better lead their own organizations, with very much a focus on education, networking, advocacy, information, and research that helps association staff and not-for-profit staff achieve their goals and their objectives within their own organization. When you take a look at the services that we provide, we have 7 chapters across Canada, as well as a national presence, and we pride ourselves on offering our member base and our segments with the tools and resources that they need to help them do their jobs better. So we run the gamut from, doing an annual conference to regional events, webinars, podcasts, video, a lot of content that is created and shared with members, through the usual communication channels like a magazine, newsletters, social media. I think the thing that what we're always looking at, and we'll certainly talk about it today, is whatever we're doing, be it at a local level, it could be in Edmonton, or whether it's at a national level, looking right across the country, what we're always focusing on is whatever programs and services that we're creating, we always want to keep it in our minds that what we're focused on is that those programs are going to help our members do their jobs better. I think, when you take a look at the membership base, we've got 3,000 members across the country. 2,400 of them are senior and mid-level staff working in a wide array of trade and professional associations, issue-specific groups, and charities. And then we have another 600 business members who provide that 2,400 member base with tools and resources as well. The organization, I think, again, is very much focused on whatever we're creating, be it content, be it lobbying government on a particular issue. We're always trying to look at it through the lens of ensuring that what we're doing is of value to the member. And I think it's something that continually drives, the CSE Board of Directors, our volunteers located in the chapters across the country, and certainly myself and my staff. Guy, your thoughts about what it is that we do and our focus?
Thank you, Michael. I think you've covered it pretty well. I would just add that as an association of association executives and business members, we really cover the full gamut of associations out there in the economy, so to speak. It's very diversified, very varied in terms of the types of members that we have. And we may be a small association in size, but we're huge in impact and influence that we offer basically our membership so that they can do better in their day-to-day job. So I think that's probably where I would leave it for now.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, our topic today is CSAE's new business model, and you hear a lot about business models these days. Would you tell us in a nutshell how you would define a business model? And Guy, why don't you take this one?
Thank you, Doug. I would start by saying that, a business model is really all about value. Business model really describes the rationale and how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. And basically, I would say that the focus has to be on content curation. After all, we're all competing with Google now, and there's a plethora of information out there. So really, the issue is how can you really make sure that you create kind of the information that has been curated so that members don't spend an inordinate amount of time and they get value in seeing something that's relevant. And the capture of value is really the issue of how do we monetize value for the organization. After all, a not-for-profit is a tax status. It's not a business model. And I think too many people confuse the issue. And I would add also that the business model discussion focuses the mind on innovation and change management. And that successful organization in the future will be organizations that can, in fact, look at a new way of doing things and also deal with the inherent resistance to change. That is a human nature. Change is fine as long as it doesn't affect me. And that's usually, the pattern that we see in organizations. So organizations that can basically focus on value and then really make sure that they're innovative and deal with change management will be successful. Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Guy. I think it's a really good comment that you made, describing the whole process of, how do you go about creating, delivering, and capturing value. And I think for a lot of associations and not-for-profit organizations, they think they know what their business model is, but when they really start to delve into it, they find that it maybe isn't as, clearly articulated or as well understood by everybody who's involved, sitting around the table, be they the board of directors, your volunteers, and your staff. And I think with respect to business models within associations, often where people get trapped is they're always only looking at it from the perspective of what can we do to better serve the members. And I know we'll talk about this a little longer on in this podcast, but I think for a lot of organizations, it's starting to think differently, as Guy said, about what the business model is. I think for individuals sitting around board tables, when they start looking at business models, often what happens is the first thing that comes up is, the whole issue of risk aversion. And we know through our work that, there's an upside and a downside to risk. But without being Pollyannish about it, our focus has really been looking at it and saying, as we examine our business model and we go to change it, we recognize there's actually an upside to the risks and the calculated and clearly thought out risks we're prepared to take moving forward. And so I think that that's a real important part of understanding, your current business model, but as importantly, what you want it to be moving forward.
Great definition. Thank you, gentlemen. And tell me, why did you get into this initiative to update your business model? Dee, why don't you take this question?
Thanks, Doug. I think it's really because of two fundamental reasons. We had some environmental issues, and I'll talk about them, and then we had our own journey and experience. So from an environmental standpoint, the biggest issue was the demography. We realized that in our membership we had a very high percentage of baby boomers, probably much larger than in the general population, which also meant that the younger generation was not as well represented. And it's just a question of time before you hit the wall. So that was the first one, and we're not the only organization out there. Everybody is facing the same thing, both in the private sector and the not-for-profit sector. But in terms of our own journey and experience, we were facing some real financial pressures. We had done some investments in the past that were required in our database and our website, for example. And, it was costly, let's face it. I mean, the cost of technology has gone down over the years, but at that time they required major investments. And we also were facing the challenge that the old formulas were not working anymore for us, and we were slow to adjust. So I'll give you an example. We have a very successful, designation, the CAE program, the Certified Association Executive designation, and we developed some new courses, the Association Essentials, that we thought would be, more targeted to the younger generation. And we did it fairly, kind of on the old model of our designation, and the courses were, a little too long, were fairly expensive for the market, and there was really not enough uptake. However, we were slow to adapt and react, so we kept developing new courses, translating them, and we just weren't going anywhere. So as we were trying to, look at our strategic plan for the future using a traditional strategic planning approach with a 3 to 5 year horizon, we realized it was not going to cut it in light of those financial pressures and the changes in the demography, and we needed to be way more nimble and agile than we had been in the past, and we had to do something now. So the business model approach really allowed us to take a new perspective and really change the tone of the conversations, and that we'll talk a little more about it. But that's really what we created this impetus for us to try the business model approach. Michael, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I'd add to Guy's comments. I think what was really interesting through the process, Guy illustrated some of the key motivators, and the one thing I'd like to focus on is the comment around strategic planning. He was right on the money on everything that he said, and in particular around the strategic planning process. We went through that initiative, and I think when we came out of it, the board and the staff started looking at things, and we said, something's not working here. And to Guy's point, I think we felt that while it was valuable to do the strategic planning process, it actually, I think, helped illustrate for us that we needed to make, I think, a more bold change and to really stand things on their head and have the courage to really look at the organization from very different perspectives. And it wasn't, it's not a slight on the strategic planning. I think what it really did for us, it illustrated, look, there's some deeper issues here that putting together a 3 to 5 year strategic plan aren't necessarily going to address. And so I think for all of us, it was a real interesting transition to go through. And I think also what we had the advantage of is, for the listeners to this podcast, I've had the great fortune of the CSAE Board of Directors is comprised of senior staff who are leading a wide array of associations and not-for-profits across Canada. So it was a real interesting group of people coming together along with our volunteers who are also running other associations, because I think intuitively they all recognized that within their own organizations they were experiencing similar challenges. They saw challenges happening right across the entire sector. So I think it was really helpful for all of us to come to that conclusion that we needed to really take a look at things and go down this road.
Michael, would you say a couple of words about the board, CSAE board, how large it is, and just a quick look at its composition?
Yes, certainly. We have 12 board members from across the country. They typically are a good representation of professional associations, trade associations, issue-specific groups, and charitable bodies. They are almost always the president and CEO, the most senior staff person within those organizations, representing a wide array of constituent groups, different focuses, and different organizational sizes. But again, I think the thing that unifies all of them is, in their own world, they're trying to move their association forward and advance its cause. And again, I sit in a very unique position, having that brain power and experience around the table. I can't tell you how many times it's just been invaluable to the process.
So, from what you say, I assume the board played a pretty major role in this business model update initiative, right?
Absolutely.